Welcome to 21st Sports Recap and Reaction for the New York Giants at the Minnesota Vikings in their Week 16 matchup played December 27th, 2015. We're going to go over every possession and the stats and give our breakdown and analysis for this Sunday night football game as the Vikings were looking to tie up the Green Bay Packers in the NFC North. Of course, either way, win or lose, they would be playing for the division title next week in Green Bay, but this was their final game in Minnesota, and they wanted to go into that one with some momentum, and the Giants were looking to play spoiler in this game, although they had already been eliminated from the playoffs. But Minnesota got the ball first, and they would actually go 3-and-out on their first possession, as would the Giants. But that was a trend that would not continue, although the Vikings would punt on their second possession after 8 plays. So now the Giants would take over after the punt on their own 37, and after picking up a first down, it was 1st and 10 in Minnesota territory at the 47. Eli dropped back and he was intercepted by Zendejo. And now the Vikings would go 3-and-out for the second time here in the first half, punt on their third consecutive possession. And now the Giants would end up punting after 5 plays. And then finally, the Vikings would put together a scoring drive starting off at midfield on their own 46. And they would get down into the red zone, but their drive stalled on the 14, and Blair Walsh hit a 32-yard field goal with just seconds left in the first to put the first points on the scoreboard, as it was now 3-0 Minnesota over New York. The Giants would bring the first quarter to a close on the kickoff, and they started off the second quarter, and Eli was sacked on first down by Robeson. That made it 2nd and 16. They didn't get anywhere on second down. And on third down, they fumbled, but they would recover their own fumble. And out would come the punting unit as the Giants went 3-and-out yet again. Minnesota would take over after the punt on the New York 44, as they were already in good field position. And then on 2nd and 14 from the 28, after picking up a first down, Kyle Rudolph caught a 28-yard touchdown pass from Teddy Bridgewater. Blair Walsh added the extra point, and it was now 10-0 Vikings over the Giants with 11 minutes left before halftime. New York would respond by putting together a scoring drive of their own as they put their first points on the scoreboard, as they would get all the way down to the 9-yard line, but their drive would stall there in the red zone, and Josh Brown hit a 27-yard field goal to make it 10-3 as the Giants got to within 7. So the Vikings scored the first 10 points, and the Giants would get a field goal. Minnesota would punt after 5 plays on their next possession, and now New York would take over on their own 11, backed up against their own end zone. And on 3rd and 1 from the 20, Harrison Smith intercepts Eli Manning, and he skates down the sideline for the touchdown. The pick 6 puts 6 on the board, but Blair Walsh missed the extra point, and so it was 16-3 as the Vikings extended their lead to 13 with 4 minutes left in the second quarter. The Giants would punt after 6 plays on their next possession, and now the Vikings would take over near midfield at their own 43, and they would end up picking up a first down on 3rd and 3 from the 50 when Bridgewater went to right for a 21-yard pass. They made a first down at the 29, but then he got sacked by Robert Ayers Jr. That pushed him back to the 37. And so then a few plays later from the 34, Blair Walsh came out to attempt a 52-yard field goal. It was up, it was good. It was now a 16-point lead for the Vikings, up 19-3 with just seconds left before halftime. The Giants would get the ball first in the second half, and they would go 3-and-out on their first possession of the third quarter. Now the Vikings would take over on their own 38. They got all the way down to the 4-yard line, but that's where their drive would stall, and Blair Walsh kicked a 22-yard field goal to push the lead to 19 with the score Minnesota 22, New York 3. So now New York would end up taking over on their own 20 after the touchback on the kickoff, and on the first play of the possession, Eli Manning was intercepted by Captain Munnerlyn, and so now the Vikings would take over on the Giants' 4-yard line after a 32-yard return as Munnerlyn nearly scored the second defensive touchdown for Minnesota. And now it's first and goal on the New York 4. Peterson picked up 2 on first down. On second and goal from the 2, Adrian Peterson scored on a 2-yard touchdown. Blair Walsh added the extra point, and it was now 29-3 as the Vikings extended their lead to 26. The Giants would go 3 and out for the second time in the third quarter, and they would punt the ball to Minnesota, who would take over on their own 18, but they wasted little time getting into New York territory as Adrian Peterson had a 39-yard run on second and 8 from the 20 to bring the ball to the 41. And they would end up having their drive stalled on the 35 of the Giants, and Blair Walsh would come out to attempt a 53-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and it was now 32-3 as the Vikings had scored 22 straight points to extend their lead to 29 with the score 32-3 with less than 2 minutes left in the third. So now the Giants would start their next possession on the 20 after the kickoff, and on second and 2 from the 28, Eli Manning hit Ruben Randall for a 72-yard touchdown. Brown added the extra point, and it was now 32-10 with a minute left in the third. So the Giants break up that 22 straight points by the Vikings with a touchdown. First it was 10 points, then a field goal, 22 points, then a touchdown. But now the Vikings would take over with a minute left in the third. They had it on the Giants 18 after an onside kick attempt by New York, which Minnesota recovered and ended up running it back 27 yards as they would start their possession in the red zone. And on 3rd and 8 from the 16, Teddy Bridgewater ran 9 yards for the first down to bring the third quarter to a close. So the Vikings would start off the fourth quarter with first and goal on the 7, but McKinnon dropped for a 4-yard loss before picking up 4 on second down. And on 3rd and goal, Jerick McKinnon scored on a 7-yard touchdown run. Blair Walsh added the extra point, and it was now 39-10. as the Vikings extended their lead to 29 once again. The Giants would end up turning the ball over on downs on their next possession after 4 plays. It would basically be a 3 and out, but they went for it on 4th down because, hey, they're down by 4 touchdowns. Why not go for it on 4th down? It was 4th and 1, but an incomplete pass turned the ball over on downs. So now the Vikings would start with the ball on the Giants' 35, and they would get into the red zone, but their drive would stall on the 9, and Blair Walsh would come out to kick a 27-yard field goal with 9.5 left in the game, and it was now 42-10. So 42-10, so they extended their lead to 32 points as the Vikings kept on rolling. And now the Giants would take over, and they would turn the ball over on downs once again. This time, though, it was on the 20-yard line as they went for it on 4th and 6. They got 20 yards within the end zone, but they couldn't get it in, and an incomplete pass turns over the ball on downs. And so now the Vikings would take over on their own 20. They picked up a first down, and on 1st and 10 from the 32, Jerick McKinnon ran it 68 yards for the touchdown. Blair Walsh added the extra point, and it was now 49-17, or 49-10 rather, with 3.5 minutes left. Getting ahead of myself a little bit as the Giants would respond with a score as they got down to the 25. And on 1st and 10 from the 25, Ryan Nassib hit Miles White for a 25-yard touchdown. Brown added the extra point, and that made it 49-17. The Vikings would get the ball, and they would bring this one to a close with Hill taking 3 knees. This game was so out of control, such a dominating win by the Vikings that they took out their starters, and even saw Jerick McKinnon run for a couple touchdowns in the fourth quarter, as it was that kind of night, as the Giants defense just could not stop anything the Vikings threw at them. And they win this one 49-17 to improve their record to 10-5. They're tied with the Packers. But regardless, even if the Vikings had lost this game, they still would have been playing for the division title next week in Lambeau Field against the Packers. Either way, whoever wins that game is going to be the division winner, and the other team will be the wild card. is the Vikings have clinched a playoff spot and knocked the Falcons out of playoff contention. So the Falcons are done, and the NFC is decided in terms of who's going to be in. It's just a matter of what seeding will be. So the seeding's still up in the air, and a couple of division titles still up in the air. But with the Vikings give themselves a chance to, build upon momentum, as they had a chance anyway to still take the division. But they officially eliminate the Falcons, and they're officially in the playoffs with the win. So they do clinch the playoff spot, and they're 6-2 at home on the season. Is they're a much better team when they're in Minnesota, especially on the defensive side of the ball, as they were really dominating the Giants in this game. It was just one heck of a massacre, as it was all Minnesota all night long. As the Giants really never stood a chance. Like I said, it was 10 points by the Vikings, then a field goal by the Giants, 22 more points by the Vikings to go up 32-3, then a touchdown by the Giants, and then you ended up with 17 more points by the Vikings before that final garbage time touchdown. And it wasn't even Eli at that point. It was Ryan Nassib. So that's how bad it got. They even took Eli out of this game. But for Minnesota in this one, Teddy Bridgewater, 15-25, 168 passing yards and a touchdown. Adrian Peterson, 22 carries for 104 yards and a touchdown as well. He also had 15 yards off of one reception, giving 119 total yards. And Jarius Wright, 3 receptions for 57 yards. Kyle Rudolph, 2 receptions for 53 yards and a touchdown. Jerick McKinnon had 7 carries for 89 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. He also had 2 catches for 8 yards, which gave him 97 total yards on the game. Eli Manning was 15-29 for 234 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. Nassib was actually 5 for 5 for 68 yards and a touchdown there. Rashad Jennings was 14-74. So he was doing all right on the ground, but they just really weren't giving him the rock as they abandoned the run. But Ruben Randall, 2 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown. Rashad Jennings, 2 catches for 62 yards. So he ended up with 136 total yards on the night. We look at the kickers in this game. Blair Walsh, 5 for 5 on the field goals, 4 for 5 on the extra points, as he had 2 field goals over 50 yards, a 52 and a 53-yarder. And Josh Brown, 1 for 1 on the field goals, 2 for 2 on the extra points. On defense for Minnesota, Johnson had 2 sacks. Harrison Smith had an interception. Captain Mutterland had an interception. And Sendejo had an interception as well. Hunter had a sack. And Robeson had a sack. As I said, Johnson had 2 sacks. And for New York, Castilla had a sack. Robert Ayers Jr. had 1.5 sacks, and Selvi had a half sack. And we look at the team stats: 17 first downs for the Vikings, 15 for the Giants. On third down, Minnesota 6 of 16, 37% conversion rate. The Giants just 1 of 11, only 9% on third down. They were 0-2 on fourth as they turned the ball over on downs twice. Total net yards, 368 for Minnesota, 363 for New York. On the ground, the Vikings netted 218, and New York netted 91. And through the air, New York netted 272. Eli sacked 4 times, losing 30 total yards. Minnesota netted 150 through the air. Bridgewater sacked 3 times, losing 18 yards. Look at the penalties in this game: 7 against the Giants for 48 yards, 2 against Minnesota for 10 yards. The Giants had 2 fumbles, but they would recover both. The Giants were 0 for 1 in the red zone, 0%. Minnesota 2 for 5 in the red zone, 40%. Of course, a lot of their scores came outside of the red zone, so they had no problem putting points on the board. And the Vikings' time of possession, 34 minutes, 57 seconds to 25 minutes and 3 seconds for New York. So the Vikings just totally dominating and really exposing the Giants. Of course, no Odell Beckham Jr. for New York in this game, but just the one player shouldn't make such a huge difference. I mean, if you got to rely on, hitting those home runs, on those big passing plays to go for touchdowns. I mean, that's not really football. I mean, this is part of the game, but that's not a way to compete. I mean, they have a good running game too with Jennings, but they're not committed to their run. And you got to wonder if the Giants, if they're going to continue to go with Coughlin. I mean, Coughlin's a great coach. He's a Hall of Fame coach. But, is his time in New York done? We'll see. I mean, hey, Sean Payton might be available. Imagine Sean Payton there with Eli, what they could do together. It'd be interesting to see. In Minnesota, a huge, dominating win, one of the biggest wins of this week. Of course, the Texans won big, and also you saw the Cardinals win big against the Packers. So the Vikings went the other way. Green Bay got dominated. They got blown out by 30 points. Minnesota, they did it the other way around, as they ended up blowing out the Giants by 32. A very dominant performance in prime time, making a statement. But it's all going to be on the line. It doesn't really matter what happened in Week 16. It matters what happens in Week 17, as the Vikings are going to Green Bay to face the Packers with all the marbles on the line, the division title, and that's going to be on Sunday Night Football. It's going to be a fun one to watch for sure. But either way, they're both in the playoffs. It just is a matter of who's going to have a home game in round one, and also determining who ends up at what seed. This will be interesting to see. It's possible you might end up seeing them play again in the wild card round, depending on what happens, with the other seeds there in the NFC. Of course, with the Redskins, they'll be the 4th seed, so it kind of depends on what happens with the Seahawks to see if they end up as the 6th seed or the 5th seed. So that'll be kind of interesting to see. You might end up seeing Minnesota versus Green Bay back-to-back weeks, but then whoever wins Week 17 would end up as the home team in the wild card. But like I said, that kind of depends on what happens with the Seahawks, if they win or if they lose. Because whoever wins the game next week with the Vikings and the Packers will be the 3rd seed. So with the way things are shaping up, and we still got to see, will the Panthers hold on to the number 1 seed? Most likely they will. And then the Cardinals would be, of course, the number 2 seed. So it'll be interesting to see how it all wraps up next week. But the Vikings getting a huge win, a huge performance with their ground game in the trenches on both sides of the ball. They were dominant. They also just a huge performance by that defense and by the secondary, as they were just picking off Eli left and right. They were actually showing stats in the game about how when Odell Beckham's not on the field, Eli's interceptions go up. And we saw that in this game, so that did hold true. But even regardless, Minnesota at home, they've got a really tough defense. They got to go on the road next week, but if they can win next week, they'll get a home game, and they're going to be tough to win. They're going to be tough to beat at home in the playoffs. They should be going on to the next round if they can secure the division title, but we'll see what happens next week. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Definitely interested to read your thoughts and opinions. Thank you very much for listening. It's greatly appreciated. I hope you're having a good day and had a great weekend and enjoyed all the sports.